This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Okay, good morning, Rabbi Glatstein. Shalom Aleichem. The next momentous day ahead of us, of course, is Tu B'Av. So this one will try to uncover one inyan of Tu B'Av, I think, which is very interesting. The Gemara tells us in Masechta Tainis, in a Mishnah of Shem Gamliel, Loi hayu yomim toim l'Yisrael k'chamisha asar b'av v'chiyam HaKippurim. There is no greater Yom Tov for Klal Yisrael than Tu B'Av and Yom Kippur. So basically, this is like a 45-minute share, but we only have about 10 minutes. Okay? So what happens on Tu B'Av and Yom Kippur? Shavahen b'nois Yerushalayim yotza'os b'chli lavan. On these days, the daughters of Yerushalayim would go out in white clothing, shu'ulin, that are borrowed, and they borrowed it not to embarrass those who didn't have, so everybody wore the same thing, and everything needed tvila, and they would go out and they would dance in the vineyards, and they would say as follows: young man, see what you're choosing. Don't look at the beauty, look at the family. Sheker hachein mehevel hayofi, isha yiras Hashem hitis halal. Okay, so basically this was Shidduch day. When? Tu B'Av and Yom Kippur. So the Gemara has the following question. Bishlama Yom Kippur, it's a day of Slicha Mechila. It's a day that the Luchais Achroinos were given. But Tu B'Av, what is it? So first we have to understand what's the Bishlama of the Gemara. Bishlama Yom Kippur, it's a day of Slicha Mechila. Therefore, you should get married on it? What does Slicha Mechila have to do with getting married? Just because it's the day of Slicha Mechila, therefore you should get a Shidduch on that day? Perhaps what the Gemara means is, since we know that when a person gets married, they have Slicha Mechila, because it's akin to Yom Kippur, so it's mistaber to enact that the zivug should take place on a day that it's already Slicha Mechila. And then the Gemara adds something. It's also the day the Luchais Achroinos were given. Okay, so what? What does that have to do with zivugim? So we could say, we know that actually the Bnei Yissaschar says, if you look at number 3, he writes in a footnote, the Luchais are the Kedushin between Knesset Yisrael to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. In fact, we know Hashem, the Baal Turim says, married Klal Yisrael b'kesef b'shtaru b'biyah. What was the kesef? There's an opinion, the Luchais. So in that case, Hashem already married Klal Yisrael on that day. In other words, from time immemorial, Tu B'Av has already been established as a day of Kedushin. So therefore it's a good Shidduch day. It's a good day to have a date because it's already a day of Shidduchim. Who? HaKadosh Baruch Hu to Knesset Yisrael. So Gemara wants to know, Tu B'Av Maihi. What's Tu B'Av? What do you mean what's Tu B'Av? We already said Tu B'Av is the day that they went out to select the Shidduch. Obviously the Gemara's kasha is, why Tu B'Av? What is special about Tu B'Av? Now, following the line of reasoning that we advanced, the same way Yom Kippur was nikva as a day of zivugim, because it was a day of zivugim from time immemorial, so how was Tu B'Av a time of zivugim from time immemorial? So the Gemara gives various things, various reasons. So the Gemara says, first of all, Rabbi Yehuda said in the name of Shmuel, that's the day the Shvatim were allowed to marry into each other. We know at the end of Maseh, they made a takana, no intermarriage, shevet to shevet, so they allowed zivugim bein shevet l'shevet. So the way we're learning the Gemara, what the Gemara is saying is, since from time immemorial it was established as a day of zivugim, therefore it's koiveya that this day is a day of shidduchim for Klal Yisrael. Then the Gemara gives another reason. Rabbi Yosef said the name Rav Nachman. It's the day that Shevet Binyamin was allowed entry into the rest of Klal Yisrael. Because of Pilegesh Begiva, no one was allowed to marry into Binyamin. And they said, you know what, from now on Tu B'Av, they said, from now on you're allowed to marry into Shevet Binyamin. So again we see, historically, it's a day of Shidduchim for Klal Yisrael. Binyamin was out of the freezer. In other words, when did Binyamin come out of the freezer? He came out of the freezer on Tu B'Av. Then the Gemara brings another pshat. Rabbi Varachanas and then Rabbi Yochanan, it's a day that the Meisei Midbar stopped dying. Okay, shkoyach, what's that have to do with Shidduchim? We know that every year for 40 years, the Meisei Midbar stopped dying. Every year on Tisha B'Av, right, there were 600,000 Jews, and the Yidden were told to dig their own graves, and in the morning of Tisha B'Av, They said, Abasko cried out, Hibadu hachayim mitoich hamesim, and 15,000 Jews died every Tisha B'Av. So, and on Tu B'Av in the 40th year, they stopped dying. Now, at first they thought maybe they miscalculated. So they slept in the grave the next night. They slept in the grave the next night until they saw a full moon on Tu B'Av, and they knew that Tisha B'Av had passed. So Rabbi Yonasan Eibeshitz asks, what do you mean they saw a new moon? We know that Rabbeinu Bechai brings that in the Midbar, they were Mekadesh Levana al pi cheshbon, not al pi re'iyah, because they couldn't see the moon, because the Ananei HaKavod blocked out the moon. So what do Chazal mean? They saw the moon, but they couldn't see the moon in the Midbar. However, says Rabbi Yonasan Eibeshitz, but in the 40th year Aaron died. When Aaron died, the Ananei HaKavod went away. So in the 40th year, they were able to see the moon. So again, what does this got to do with Shidduchim? So I would humbly suggest, the Gemara continues, that so long as the Mesei Midbar were dying, God did not speak to Moshe Rabbeinu. When the Mesei Midbar stopped dying, Hashem spoke to Moshe Rabbeinu. So Rashi says, what do you mean? Hashem didn't speak to Moshe for 40 years? Says Rashi, Hashem didn't speak to Moshe peh el peh. That intimate connection between HaKadosh Baruch Hu and Klal Yisrael, which, by the way, every Jew will experience when Mashiach comes. That's what we say, Yishakeni min hashikois piyu. So in other words, the zivug bein Moshe HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that connection between Moshe Rabbeinu and Hashem, did not come to completion until Tu B'Av. So again, there's an inyan of a zivug on Tu B'Av. The Gemara brings another opinion. The Gemara says it's the day that Hoshea ben Elah abolished the centuries that Yeravam ben Nevat set up, that Klal Yisrael cannot be oilei regel. So what that has to do with zivugim, somehow that was like, it reunited Klal Yisrael with HaKadosh Baruch Hu at the Beis HaMikdash. Rav Masna says it's the day that the Harugei Beitar were given to Kavura. What does that have to do with Shidduchim? What does burial have to do with marriage? Why are you laughing? Maybe there's some kind of there's an inyan that when there's kavura, the neshama is able to go up to Shamayim. That's why we say a misa is like a yom hilula. It's the connection between the neshama and the Shamayim. So perhaps that's also a reason. And then finally the Gemara says Rabbah and Rabbi Yosef. We had a share recently on Rabbah and Rabbi Yosef. They both say it's the day they stopped chopping wood for the Mizbeach. Why they stopped chopping wood for the Mizbeach? Because comes Tu B'Av, the sun starts getting weak. Right now you go outside, they did studies, a guy was jogging in Death Valley, and they asked him, pal, why are you jogging in Death Valley? You don't know it's dangerous? He says, why shouldn't I jog in Death Valley? An hour later he dropped dead. Right? Because it's like 123 degrees over there. So, people can't kick a habit. It's very good to jog, but not in an oven. Let's say in a self-cleaning oven, it's not a good idea to jog. So the sun is very strong now. They did studies that actually it's hotter inside a car than on top of a frying pan in these makaimais. So anyway, the sun is strong until Tu B'Av. On Tu B'Av, the sun starts getting weak. Sun gets weak, the sun is not drying the wood. The wood now is moist. The wood is moist, there could be worms in the wood. So they stopped chopping wood on Tu B'Av. So what's the simcha? So some Rishonim learn, the simcha is they completed doing a mitzvah. I believe that's what the Rashbam says. They completed doing a mitzvah, you make a simcha. This is the makar for making a siyum when you finish a masechta. However, Rabbeinu Gershom says that the simcha was the sun gets weak. Why does the sun get weak? Because the nights are longer. The nights are longer, there's more time to learn. Comes Tu B'Av. Actually, Rabbeinu Gershom says they stopped chopping the wood. They stopped chopping the wood. They have a few minutes extra to learn every day. You have a few minutes extra to learn every day, it's a simcha. So you could say, what's the inyan of Shidduchim? So now, Klal Yisrael are reunited with the Torah. Torah tzivalanu Mayrasha Kehilas Yaakov. Be it as it may, these are all reasons that establish Tu B'Av as a day of Shidduchim for Klal Yisrael. Comes the Bnei Yissaschar. And the Bnei Yissaschar wants to know, I understand that it's a day of Shidduchim because all of these episodes happened in history that teach, that show that this is a day predisposed to Shidduchim. But why did all those episodes happen on this day? Meaning I understand, Binyamin was out of the freezer. And I understand they allowed the Shvatim to marry into each other. But why did it happen? Why did all these things happen on Tu B'Av? So Bnei Yissaschar famously says that HaKadosh Baruch Hu created the world for Klal Yisrael. When did Hashem create the world? Rabbi Eliezer says on the first day of Tishrei. Now, even though in most Shiurim we say the halacha is like Rabbi Shua, that we paskin like Rabbi Shua, that Hashem created the world on the first day of Nisan, that's what we usually say because the Ran writes that. But for this year, we're going to say that we paskin like Rabbi Eliezer. That's what the Bnei Yissaschar says. I don't really understand that. I don't know. I don't necessarily. I'm not going to say I don't agree with that, but normally, halachically, we say that the halacha is like Rabbi Shua. It's a klal and shas that Rabbi Eliezer is a shmuti, and we don't paskin like Rabbi Eliezer. We paskin like Rabbi Yeshua, and the Ran says we paskin like Rabbi Yeshua. But the Bnei Yissaschar says it seems like the fact that in Rosh Hashanah we say Zeh Hayom Tchilas Ma'asecha, that indicates that we go like Rabbi Eliezer in this issue. So if we paskin like Rabbi Eliezer, Bnei Yissaschar says that Hashem created the world at Bechad B'Tishrei, but that means that's the day Hashem created man. So what's the first day of creation? Chaf Hei Elul. That's why the Rosh brings in Barcelona, the minhag was to start Slichos Chaf Hei Elul. We were just in Barcelona. They didn't start Slichos yet, only Chaf Hei Elul start Slichos. So if the first day of creation is Chaf Hei Elul, and Hashem created the world for Klal Yisrael, we know Arba'im Yoim Koydem Yitziras Havlad Bas Kol Amra Bas Ploni LePloni, 40 days before the creation of the embryo, the heavenly voice says so and so to so and so. So if Hashem created the world for Yisrael, and the first day of creation is Chaf Hei Elul, 40 days before it entered Hashem's mind to create the world for Klal Yisrael. What day is 40 days before Chaf Hei Elul? Tu B'Av. So Tu B'Av was the day of the great Shidduch between Knesset Yisrael and HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It entered Hashem's mind that this Shidduch should be read, that this is a good zivug. So on Tu B'Av, the reason why all these inyanim of zivugim happened on Tu B'Av is because Hashem decided to create the world and be mezaveg with Klal Yisrael on Tu B'Av. So now I want to share with you a chiddush. It's very original. Sometimes when a chiddush is too original, it's a little bit of, you wonder why nobody else, but let's try it. We know that Yaakov Avinu, Parsha Vayetze, he comes to the Temple Mount, he comes to the Har Bayis, Vayishka b'makom hahu. What does Rashi say? He slept in that place, but the 14 years in Shem Ve'ever, he never slept at night. Let's say like this. Let's say you had a good Zman, and during the Zman, you learned every single minute. You didn't waste a minute, even lunch. And then you come home, Ben Azmanim, and then after the meal, you take a break for 1 minute, and your father says, "Oh, you're not learning!" Come on, I've been learning straight for 14 years. He didn't battle one word for 14 years. He didn't even sleep in a bed for 14 years. And here, Yaakov Avinu goes to sleep one night. We don't know one thing about his learning. All we know is the moment he battles, he's not learning. Vayishka b'makom hahu. He's not learning. So I think we could answer as follows. We know that Yaakov Avinu took stones, he put it under his head. Says Ramah, Tisha B'Av night, you should pain yourself with sleep. If you sleep with 2 pillows, sleep with 1 pillow on Tisha B'Av. And some people put stones under their head, Tisha B'Av night. Raise your hand if you put stones under your head, Tisha B'Av night. From now on, if anybody needs stones, I have in my backyard. Rabbi Menachem Fuchs has in his backyard stones. You could borrow stones, you could put it under your pillow Friday night. Mayor will deliver it to your house, yeah? Yeah, Mayor agreed to deliver the stones to your house for next Tisha B'Av. It's a service. It's like aravos. You could get, by the way, if you want aravos and stones, it's cheaper. You could get 25 cents off your arava if you take a stone with it. So why do you put a stone under your pillow Tisha B'Av night? Because Yaakov Avinu saw the Churban in his dream. Vayach Elohim. So it says he saw a sulam. The Rambam says in Yaakov's dream, he saw the Malchios, he saw their Shibud. So the question is, how do we know Yaakov Avinu saw the Churban in his dream? You see in the Chumash, you saw angels going up and down the ladder. How do you know he saw the Churban? Says the Heilige Chassam Sofer, we know the Beis Hamikdash Shel Mala is mechuvan keneged the Beis Hamikdash Shel Mata. So long as the heavenly temple is aligned opposite the Beis Hamikdash Shel Mata, Beis Hamikdash can never be destroyed. That's why it says in Eicha, in order for Hashem to destroy the Beis Hamikdash, Nier Hashem Mikdashai, he had to shake the Mikdash Shamala. He moved the Mikdash Shamala out of place. Now it's not aligned anymore, so now the Beis Hamikdash could be destroyed. We know that Yaakov Avinu, when he was traveling to Haran, the Beis Hamikdash moved toward him. The Beis Hamikdash moved toward him, they're not aligned anymore. So now when he's dreaming, he must have seen the Churban. Okay? Says the Chassam Sofer, probably if the Beis Hamikdash Shemata is not aligned connected to the Beis Hamikdash Shemata, it must have been Tisha B'Av when he had the dream. Now we understand why we put the stone under the pillow the night of Tisha B'Av to commemorate the dream of Yaakov, because he didn't just dream about the Churban, it was Tisha B'Av. So he put stones under his head. Now we know why he didn't learn. It was Tisha B'Av. He can't learn on Tisha B'Av. Okay, so now I'm going to say the Chiddush.
14 years and the 14 years.
Yeah, that doesn't. Maybe, yeah. He probably didn't learn then also, but it wasn't Noigeya for us. So, are you ready for this Chiddush? What do you mean he didn't learn on Tisha B'Av? The Beis Hamikdash wasn't destroyed yet. But we know from the Beis Halevi that it's not the pshat that halachos and dinim come after historical events. Halachos and dinim are reality. Hashem created, there's a mitzvah of matzah. Once there's matzah, Hashem took us out of Mitzrayim. Once there's marar, we had bitterness in Mitzrayim. Once there's tefillin, Hashem had to make arms. Once there's a mitzvah of kibbut av v'em, Hashem had to make parents. So I want to say, I thought of this on Tisha B'Av. This is what I didn't want to say on Tisha B'Av. Why did all these bad things happen to us on Tisha B'Av? Because since there's a din you're not allowed to learn, so we have no protection on Tisha B'Av. So Mamela, it's a lightning rod of tragedy. It's not the pshat, bad things happen, so we're ba'avela, so you're not allowed to learn. You see, Yaakov Avinu already wasn't learning even before the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed. Okay. So let's make the following cheshbon. The next day he comes to Uncle Lavan. He says, I want to marry your daughter. What day does Yaakov come to Lavan? Tisha B'Av. So Lavan says, got to work 7 years. So Yaakov works 7 years. 7 years are up, Erev Tisha B'Av. Who does he marry Erev Tisha B'Av? Leah. Yaakov wakes up in the morning, V'hine Leah! Surprise! Yaakov said, you messed me up. I want to marry Rachel. Lavan says, you're a modern guy. You don't know the halacha? Ein ma'arvin simcha b'simcha. You need to learn frumkeit from me. You can't ein ma'arvin simcha. So Yaakov says, how long do I have to wait? 7 days. So let's count.
2 months.
To 9, to 10, to 11, to 12, to 13, to 14, to 15. The most celebrated shidduch in the history of the world, Yaakov and Rachel, Tu B'Av. So no wonder it's a day that's been established as a day of zivugim for Klal Yisrael. What is the most anticipated, celebrated shidduch in the history of the world? Yaakov and Rachel. L'chayr, it happened on Tu B'Av. So we hope, Be'ez Hashem, on this day, Hashem should be mashpia on Klal Yisrael, zivugim toivim, and everybody should find their zivug hagon, and everybody should be mezavig with the Torah, and we should have only b'suras toivos. Have a wonderful day. Bracha v'atzlacha. Shkayach.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.